Hey, welcome back everyone. Been away for a while, doing summer stuff, having fun. And now it's time to get back to work and finally get to something I've promised myself and mentioned here a couple times that I would do, is change the fork oil on the 2016 Ninja 1000. There is no service interval mentioned in the book, if you look in your owner's manual, at all for fork oil, which is odd, seeing it is one of the parts that wears all the time. Every time you hit a little bump in the road, those forks are moving all the time. You've got springs in there rubbing against aluminum that's shedding those little fine bits of aluminum into the oil. Oil's getting hot, oil's breaking down, it's oil. So I don't know what the interval is, but I've got about 12,000 miles on the bike, and I think that's plenty of mileage on the fork oil. The process is technically simple. You have to remove the front forks, which means we're going to remove the brakes, the brake sensor, the ABS sensor, the front fender, the front tire, and then the forks out of the fork tubes, and we'll be able to get to the service itself. This is going to require one special tool, particularly a special lift. The lift is special. It's for lifting the front wheel without lifting from the forks. It lifts from below the triple clamp. There's a pin that goes into a hole and it lifts from that, and I'll show you how that all works. So without further ado, let's get wrenching. This is the special stand I was talking about. It's from Pitbull. Here's how it works. Basically, this part is hinged. It has a pin that's sized to the correct size for the pinhole underneath the triple clamp, and this pin goes in the clamp, in the hole, and when you lift up, it raises it from here on the triple clamp, and that's all there is to it. See if I can show you the hole. So up in here, which is extremely dark, I'm not sure you're going to be able to see it, there's a rubber plug that comes out. That's that guy right there. And it plugs this hole, which is where the pin goes. That's in the bottom of the triple tree. So that's where we're going to put the pin and lift it right up, hopefully. There you go. One of the features of this particular model of the lift is that this handle is supposedly detachable, so you don't trip on it as you're walking around. I think, yeah, there's a little storage for it, at least to keep it out of the way. So there's that. The basic things I think we need to do is we'll have to remove the ABS sensor bolt which is mounted into the fork tube assembly here. Remove the brake caliper, both sides. We'll have to suspend the brake caliper on something so it doesn't stress the hoses. We'll have to remove the front axle and the front fender. So let's get on those right away. One of the things I want to take note of and record here somehow is how tall in the triple clamp the forks currently come. You can see that there's about, well, I don't know, 1-2 mils maybe above this point right here. So I want to note that because I want to get the fork tubes back in their original alignment position as far as their depth. to get the breaker bar and socket in here on this lift. While it's in here, I'm going to have to break it loose on the ground. Son of a bitch. I finally figured out I have to turn the handlebars slightly, turn the front wheel in order to, I'll show you here, in order to get clearance on the axle. Because the axle, when the wheel is straight, is right behind this freaking lift. Small revelation, the fairings have to come off because I don't have access to the bottom triple clamp bolts. Now you can see with the fairings off, down here the lower triple clamp bolts are now exposed and we can get to those. Okay, let's loosen up the upper and lower triple clamps. The next trick will be to loosen this cap using the red anodized nut, not the silver one. This is our preload adjustment. We don't want to touch that, and we won't need to because we're not going to mess with those at all, so we'll put it back right where it was. So we just need, I think it's a 17 mil. We'll check. We'll have to get this up in the vise. Okay, I got the fork in the vise. I got a big towel wrapped in there. I have it just snug so it won't fall down. You don't want to pinch it too hard. Obviously this is the soft aluminum. So this cap is a 24 millimeter nut, and all I have in a 24, I don't have a 24 wrench, and I don't have a 24 normal socket, but I do have an impact socket. Let's lower it in the vise a little bit, maybe I get a better grip on it. Okay, there we go. So here's the plan. We've got ourselves a graduated measuring cup here in both ounces and milliliters and cc's actually. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the cap off and empty the fork oil into the graduated fluid, and we'll have to pump the cartridge in there to get as much out as we can, and whatever we get out, we'll measure that, and that's what we'll put back in. So to remove the cap, this is under tension with a spring in it. I'm going to do this slowly just until we hear the threads pop. That means we're done with the threads. Right there, hear that? So that means the cap should be loose. So you can see if I raise the shock in the outer tube, cap comes up, and we'll be able to dump the fluid out from the top here. So there we go. This will take a while, so I'll be back. We're going to put the cap back on now, just hand tight so it doesn't pop off. And we're going to want to pump the shock to drive all the extra fluid that's still in the cartridge inside out. And we want to do that a good, well, I don't know, several times at least to make sure we get it all out. So okay. Then we'll go ahead and dump out more of the oil we got out of it. And we're going to do that a couple more times until we get most of the oil out. If we want to get any more of the oil out of the shock, we're going to have to either hang it upside down overnight or disassemble it completely, and at that point you might as well put in new fork seals as well because you got it all apart. You can see it's pretty dirty. Let's see what we got out of here. It looks like we got 430 milliliters, and that is exactly what we're going to put back in. So we're going to put this in the recycle oil, clean this out really thoroughly, and then fill it up with at 430 and put that back in the shock. Well, let's talk about fork oil for just 1 second. There's a lot to actually talk about, and I know very little of it. The more I researched, the less I knew. What I did find out is that obviously there are different weights of fork oil. And just like they don't have a service interval in your manual for the Ninja 1000, nor do they specify the fork oil weight. I called up my friends at the local Kawasaki service dealership here, and my go-to mechanic friend, and he said it's 5 weight. I said, great, okay, now I can get 5 weight oil. Then I found out that they depends upon the manufacturer and how they test it, the test conditions of what 5 weight actually means. And there's a whole bunch of data on it, and it's fairly confusing, but I managed to consume enough of it to feel very dangerous and make a decision. And what I decided was that this Maxima shock fluid 7 weight is where I wanted to go. It's slightly, now it's not a 5 weight, it's a 7 weight, but again, you can't judge a weight by its number. You got to judge it by other factors. There's these numbers here. And I will go into that later if I have time in the video, if it doesn't go too long. But for 2 reasons. One, it's pretty close to a 5 weight. It's a little bit heavier than the stock specifications if you look at the real data, not just the weight. And I wanted that because I'm kind of chunky, and I do take up a lot of mass on the bike, and I do also take up a lot of the fork setting, the compression and rebound and settings, because you know, I'm heavier, so I'm going to put just a little bit thicker viscosity, if you will, oil in the fork. But just so you know, what I found out is the fork oil weight is 5 weight from the factory. So there you go. So what was the number we had? 430 milliliters, right? So let's get 430 back in here. This happens to be a nice, pretty reddish pink. I want to try to get as little air bubbles in there as possible, and I just blobbed up a few air bubbles. And that is 430. Okay, I've got her back in the vise with the towel again, just enough to hold her down. I've got the bottom of the shock, the inner fork tube, with a bungee cord up to a door here just to keep it pushed up, so this is now up inside the tube and I can pour oil down inside. So you want to pour really slowly, don't let it overflow or drip out the side, or you're going to have to start all over again and measure it all out. And again, you try not to get a whole lot of air bubbles in it. Need to lower the tube just a tad here so it doesn't collide with the top of this. There we go. Put that last bit in. Tad of grease and just a tiny bit around the threads, just so next time she will come apart nicely. So now I can release this and lower the inner tube in, like so. And in order to, here's what I do to make sure I don't cross thread things. The lefty loosey, so counterclockwise is off. I'm going to turn it counterclockwise until I hear and can feel the threads clunk, and that clunks them into place. That means we're good to go. So let's see if we can hear it. Right there, hear that? Okay, that means it's settled in, and now you can just twist her in. Okay, that was just hand tight, and the torque for this is like almost nothing. Remember, the triple clamp is holding it right here, and this is no way you're going to back out. So you don't have to torque this down. This is just aluminum, so it's pretty soft. So all I'm going to do is give it like just a nudge up. That's it. Now tight. Okay, there's a couple more things we need to do before we can put this back on. One, that cartridge is emptied out, so we need to pump all the air out of that inner cartridge by working this thing about 10 to 15 times. And you'll feel it, I can feel it stiffening up and getting the air out. Now we also want to clean up the inner fork here. And if there's and inspect it for any kind of burrs or scratches or anything like that, which this looks really clean, amazingly. Huh. Okay. Well, if we found anything, I would take some, I don't know, 800 grit sandpaper and just lightly just remove those scratches, because any of those scratches will, over time, affect the seal and you'll get leaks. Another thing I want to do is just clean it up. Just a little Windex here. Just clean the grunge off of it. Just want to clean underneath the dust seal, make sure that's cleaned out as well. So we just need to carefully pry that up. Careful not to mar your aluminum there. There we go. So that just slides up out of the way, and there's you can see the crud ring. I want to get rid of that. Just want to inspect in there, make sure that everything looks okay, there's no leaks, no dirt, everything looks nice and clean. So we will just put carefully just press our test ring back in. Okay. Last thing we want to do is grease the fork seal. And I'll give credit here to Dave Moss of Dave Moss Tuning. Check him out. He's got a great website, a lot of YouTube videos. The man is an absolute genius in suspension tuning for racing. He's a heck of a racer himself. Fabulous. Yeah, he did our tuning on our bikes. It's well worth it if you can get a session with him. But according to Dave, we put a little bit of grease, just a tiniest bit of grease around here. We can activate the shock, and by activating it, the seal will slightly open up and grab the grease and suck it in. So we'll just use, as he has recommended, the tiniest bit. Don't need much. And again, according to Dave, we activate this a couple of times just to spread the grease out, and then one really good one, that really one good activation will open up the seal slightly and suck the grease in. So, and then one big one. God, it actually worked. All right, Dave. And then we'll just clean any residual grease off here, and we are good. That is a full fork oil change. My first one. Now I'll just do the same thing the other side. Got the fork back in, and now I'm just going to set that reveal at the top here. And so I'm just exposing just a tad of the silver fork above that. Now the type needs, it's 20 Newton meters torque spec on the top, 25 on the bottom, and you need to alternate between the two twice to make sure they're torqued down. So I'm going to give these just a hand tight here, just so the fork doesn't slip out. Just snugging them down. Okay. So get the torque wrench out and we'll set it up for Newton meters, and we will go with 25. I'm going to go with 20 on the bottom, and then I'll snug it to 25. There's 21 on the bottom. And on the top. 20 on the top. So I'm just going to get it close. There's 18. I'll do the other one. There's 18. $20. 20 there. Check the top again. 20. Then we'll set it back up for 25. That's one done. pinch bolts are torqued to 15 foot-pounds, axle bolt 80 foot-pounds. Front caliber mounting bolts are torqued to 22 newton meters or 16 foot-pounds. There you go. So the bike's back together. I've got the forks back on, I've got the brake calipers back on, I've got the speed sensor back on, and everything's torqued down to spec and it's all ready to go. But I'm going to leave her up on the lift because we're going to do another service on the bike, a radiator fluid flush and recharge. I'm going to do that next, so stay tuned for that. Hope you got learned something about the fork oil change here. That was my first time. Pretty straightforward. I'll give you some feedback on the fluid viscosity that I've chosen. Also, I mentioned that we're not going to change the settings on the dampening and compression and rebound and whatnot, which is true, I did not. I'm going to ride with them just the way they are, but I may have to go back and change them after I ride it and see how that ride feels with the higher viscosity fluid. So I'll get back to you and let you know how that goes as well. So in the meantime, please subscribe if you haven't. Like us if you like this content, and as always, ride safe, keep wrenching. Cheers.